Ladies and gentlemen, this House stands firm in its beliefs that the government should fully own and manage all public transportation in Indonesia. The current system public transportation in Indonesia currently suffers from inefficiency, lack of integration, and inconsistent service quality due to fragmented ownership by the government and private operators. The status quo allows profit-seeking private companies to prioritize profitable routes and neglect rural and low-income areas, leading to unequal access. In addition, uncoordinated services result in overlapping routes, fare differences, and safety concerns due to cost-cutting by some private operators. Our proposal is for the government to fully own and manage all public transportation, including buses, trains, and ride-hailing services. This will standardize fares, improve infrastructure through centralized planning, and prioritize public welfare over profit. A fully nationalized system can address this. First, it ensures equitable access. No more villages cut off from hospitals and schools. Second, it ensures efficiency. One unified network with seamless transfers and smart etiquettes. Third, it prioritizes safety and sustainability. No more private operators skipping maintenance to maximize profits. Opponents might insist that privatization is the key to innovation in public transport. However, we must ask innovation for whom? In fact, private sector driven innovation tends to focus on profitable market segments, such as urban communities with high purchasing power. Just look at how Gojek and Grab dominate big cities, but neglect underdeveloped areas such as the interior of Papua and remote island in Maluku. In fact, millions of residents there also have the right to access proper transportation. In addition, the opposition claims that the government is corrupt and therefore can't manage transportation is an overly simplistic argument. The problem of corruption is not an excuse to leave everything to the private sector, but rather a challenge that we must overcome with bureaucratic reform. We can implement a strict supervision system such as independent audit by the Anti-Corruption Agency and public participation in budget oversight, digitalization of the tender process to prevent project markups. Severe penalties for corruption in the public sector, as stipulated in the anti-corruption law. A concrete example can be seen from Transjakarta, which began to improve after the intervention of the electronic payment system and real-time compliance via the application. This means that with good governance, even SOS can be efficient and accountable. Most importantly, this debate is not an ideological battle of capitalism and socialism, but rather a moral choice. With transparent and equitable state management, national transportation can become a backbone of equitable development. Then, let's reform the bureaucracy, not given into companies that abandon flood victims with disaster threats. Their so-called public-private partnership have a track record of corruption, like the Tanjung Priok port scandal. We propose real oversight, independent audits, citizen council, and show-style transparency in metro management. The opposition offers ban-aid solutions, fair caps, weak regulation, and foggy promises of competition. But history shows that privatization always leaves people poor. Look at the bullet trains in Japan that were built with public investment, not corporate greed. Indonesia deserves a transportation system that serves every citizen, not just shareholders. Reject their fears, create comprehensive transportation equality in Indonesia. Ladies and gentlemen, this motion is a recipe for policy disaster. When the government monopolizes the entire public transportation system, what happens is not efficiency, but a spike in taxes to cover operational costs, a decline in service quality due to lack of competition, and a stagnation of innovation. We only need to look at existing examples. Transjakarta, despite being in operation for a long time, still faces serious problems such as delays, inhuman overcrowding, and chronic dependence on APBD subsidies that burden that state budget. On the other hand, private sectors such as Grab and Gojek have proven that innovation can be born out of competition. They introduce cashless payment system, real-time tracking, and even integration of systems such as bike sharing and micromobility in just a matter of months. If we remove the role of the private sector and leave everything to the state, we not only lose the dynamism of the market, but also stifle the technological advancement and convenience what people enjoy today. We propose a better solution. Organize private operators to serve rural routes. Incentives green fleets with tax breaks, not expropriation. Adopt a hybrid model like Japan's railway, private efficiency with public oversight. Nationalization means giving full control to the core bureaucracy. Remember the blackouts perpetrated by PLN, or the loss of billions in infrastructure funds. Don't trade a broken system for a broken monopoly. The government's nostalgia for state control is mind-boggling. They said the Seoul Metro, but ignore how private railroad KTX outperforms state-owned railways in Indonesia. They claim that private companies are exploiting by raising fares but admit that MRT fares are still unaffordable for millions. Our plan is to cap fares while keeping private competition to drive quality. And their fleet management example. Singapore uses private operators under strict contracts to ensure reliability. Nationalization is not the only way, but the laziest way. We replace an already chaotic system with a government system that will stagnate and not grow. The government's vision of monopolizing all public transportation is a dangerous fantasy. In many countries, we have seen how state monopolies are a huge financial burden. Britain's heavily subsidized but often led railways. Argentina's business system that burns through budget with no improvement in service. And India's airports that stagnate due to bureaucracy management. Why should Indonesia repeat the same mistake? We offer a real and miserable solution, an incentive-based by system and accountability. The government can impose fines on operators that bypass critical rules and reward tools that adopt green technologies. Contracts can be designed to be oriented towards service quality and passenger satisfaction. The government's role should be that of a strong regulator, not a sole owner prone to corruption and politicization. Don't bet on an ideology that has failed elsewhere, stop the movement before we are trapped in an expensive, slow, and unfavorable system.